Welcome back to another podcast here on the Brandon Smith YouTube channel. This week I was delighted to be joined by Anna Jones, who is the member of the Senedd for the Vale of Clwyd, and also the Deputy Presiding Officer of the Senedd, the Deputy Speaker. So a very important person in our community here in Clwyd. We spoke about the COVID-19, we spoke about the lockdown, when can we expect the children to go back to full-time education within the schools, and also talk about how great the NHS are. We also briefly looked at some of your listener questions, so make sure to get in touch for future guests to get your questions in. Make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you enjoyed, comment your thoughts down below, and follow my socials just so you can get your questions in for the next guest. Enjoy the podcast. Okay, thank you so much, Anne, for coming on. First of all, I want to know how you're doing, how you're coping with lockdown. How's your role changed since the UK went into lockdown?
Well, I think I'm coping very well. My elasticated skirt waist is getting stretched, and that's because I've taken up baking. And for those of people who know me will know that's a complete and utter first. So I'm doing well. My family are doing well, thank goodness. And so my role has changed. Talking to the likes of yourself and others on Zoom now. I've never heard of Zoom until the lockdown. Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and it's a whole new vocabulary there for somebody who has just moved into social media. I'm sort of doing quite well, and it has changed an awful lot in terms of the fact that we're trying to do everything virtually now, but we were the very first Parliament to reconvene, and we were only a week or 10 days away, and we'd reconvened as a virtual Parliament, and now we're just increasing that. So it's about learning how. So we started off with a smaller number of people, and then we've moved now, and so hopefully when we go back, we're on what they call official recess, and that just gives the staff and the IT people an opportunity to sort of have some downtime, because we all need some downtime, even though your downtime often is just sitting on the settee. And so it has changed. And so when we go back next week, we're hoping that we go back with a full complement of Assembly members and over the stream. But it's very difficult to try and chair a meeting, because part of my job is to chair the plenary sessions. It's quite difficult to chair when you can see little tiles of people's faces and you can't get them to shut up. And you'll probably find that's quite difficult with me. Through this, you'll have to just put your hand up and tell me to shut up. So it's quite difficult to do that, but nevertheless, we're learning, and it's a whole new way of life for all of us. But hopefully, we're getting the things there, and hopefully, my constituents who are contacting me are getting a response back. Might not like what they're getting back, but at least they're getting that response back.
And I think this technology is really interesting. We're seeing people learn new skills with it. And what I really enjoyed is being able to connect with other friends who maybe I haven't heard from for years, so I wouldn't have thought of getting in contact with before this lockdown. But now I'm chatting to them nearly every day, catching up with them, although sometimes that is through the Xbox. we are still in contact with them. We're going to talk about the lockdown, and we're going to talk about the effects on our local area here in Rail and the Clwyd area. Lots of different effects on different people. Many people will know that Wales decided to keep the lockdown in place for and added to start with 3 weeks. Can you explain a bit about how you've seen that work and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, of course, we're still in lockdown and our message hasn't changed. And I think our message was quite a very simple one. It was stay home, protect the NHS and save lives. That's still very much the message today. And we have to, by law, or the government has to, by law, look at these regulations every 3 weeks. So the next time they have to look at them is Thursday of this week, is it the 28th? Every day runs into, I never know what day it is. So I think it's Thursday the 28th, they have to look at it. And so the Cabinet will meet and they'll take soundings from people, and they're taking soundings. We've been having various catch-up meetings with various ministers about where we think we can. But it's all been driven by the science and the public health message. And many of us here in North Wales will know that we were behind that curve. So we didn't see the real spike in the number of cases relating to COVID initially, but now we're beginning to see them. And that was the modelling that was done between Public Health Wales and Betsy Cadwallader Health Board, that always predicted middle towards the end of May would be an issue whereby we would see the increase there. So I think, you know, that's the modelling that's shown that. And of course, this R number, what the R number was, but it's the reproduction number, obviously. And it's explained quite simply that when it's below, so we're at 0.8 at the moment in Wales, which is still quite high. And so that's why we've maintained the lockdown. And the last 3 weeks of lockdown, so this period that we're in at the moment, is still being stay at home, save lives, protect the NHS. But they increased, so we increased to be able to go out more than once a day for exercise, but to remain local. And the exercise must start and finish at your own home. And that was an attempt to stop people trying to gather together, going, you know, so yes, you can run along the promenading rail, but you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't come from Denbigh, for example, to run along the promenading rail. But at least it's local. And then we opened, well, the Welsh Government opened up the golf clubs and angling and said those were forms of exercise. And so consequently now, it will be a look at how that has happened and how people have managed that before they look at the next step. But we are taking very, very gingerly baby steps. Well, the government is gingerly baby steps in reducing this lockdown because of the fear of a real second spike. Because I don't think we've seen the top spike, and hopefully, please God, we don't see it. That would be quite good. But we are seeing increasing numbers of cases, and so we do have to be aware of that. If that R figure goes above 1, so at 0.8, sadly, we're still going to see deaths. We're going to see new cases and we're going to see deaths. And that is terrible because that's somebody's, you know, it's somebody's family. It's somebody who would be a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, an aunt and uncle, a nephew, a niece, or whoever. And that is just so dreadful. And the situation whereby you can't go and hold the hand of your loved one if they're dying, or you can't go and see them in hospital, is very, very difficult for people to contend with. But nevertheless, it's what has kept the figures low. Now, we're going to see some deaths round about, and I saw a paper which said round about 800 deaths at 0.8. But if it goes to 1.1, which is only 0.3 percentage points, if I've got my maths right, that could rise to somewhere in an additional 7,500 to 8,000 deaths. So for me, as much as, you know, I'm feeling the lockdown as like most, you know, I haven't seen my family, I haven't seen my grandchildren, we keep in touch, but I haven't seen them. I understand that, because I think there will be other times when I will be able to see my, you know, God willing, I'll see my grandchildren later in the day. And so and I think most people are feeling that. They're obeying it. They're thinking that. And a lot of people have said the message in Wales was simple and it was uncomplicated. But as we move forward with the system of unlocking our society, which was the paper that the government have brought out, we are going to have to see, and it is just all, you know, nobody has, but they're looking at the science. So if the science sort of says, yes, we probably could move, so instead of taking 2 steps forward, we could take 4 steps forward. We might be able to do that, but there's always that worry at the back of your mind that if the R rate starts to increase, or we see more and more new cases, how do we pull it back? And I think that's the difficulty for anyone who's got to make those decisions.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that we do those little baby steps first before committing to try and do something so far ahead that suddenly there's so many more cases, the NHS can't deal with it. And just as we get into this, big thanks to the NHS, they're doing amazing work.
Oh, absolutely.
Incredible.
Absolutely. I'm going to go out every Thursday and clap. Yeah. You know, I'm out there, and you know, my neighbours, or we all go out and clap. Because yes, without them, we wouldn't have been able to do this. So we owe it to them. And, you know, we've come this far, haven't we? So we've gone through the pain and the heartache, you know, with not seeing loved ones. And we've gone through the fact, you know, I've got a photographic poster in my window, my grandchildren painted, crayoned in for me for the NHS. And they shoved that through the letterbox. Now, you know, they would have run in and, you know, but they didn't. And so I've missed that, and I miss that sort of thing. But we've gone through that, and to destroy that for the sake of perhaps another fortnight, 3 weeks, who knows? I think it's a price that we have to look at, but it's something the government are very much aware of, is that the family contact, it's family contact that people are missing most.
Definitely. And as I said before, and as you said, reinstate that, stay at home, protect the NHS, protect each other. One of the big concerns for many people in the local area is about education. Obviously, so many children out of education at the minute. The biggest question, I guess, for many parents is, when can we expect children to return to school?
Well, it won't be the 1st of June. We've made that quite clear as well. Welsh Labour government have made it quite clear, and Kirsty Williams, I think, has been very clear. But what they're doing, what we have done, I mean, schools have been open. There have been hub schools. So I think we have to, some people think that teachers are just at home and like everybody else, but they're not. They've been doing hub schools. They've been doing almost looking after vulnerable children, looking after children of key workers, so key workers can go to school, back to work. So it's, and what they're doing is looking at the reasons why. Now, it won't be the 1st of June. I think, I think Kirsty's been quite clear as the Education Minister that she will be the person who will tell them. But they're working with the unions, they're working with the teachers, they're working, and they're working with the parents as well, and trying to find a way that is suitable. Because the last thing, you can't tell a 5 or a 6-year-old not to run and hug somebody they haven't seen. It's just, it just wouldn't work, So, and it really and truthfully, it's about how we make sure. It's all right saying children probably are the least of people who will worry to get the coronavirus, but it's the teachers mixing, and it's parents going to drop them off at school, and it's all of that interaction there that we have to be sure of. And so, there's Welsh Government put a lot of money into online teaching. We were one of the first to make it available for the whole of wherever they are. And they've actually looked at some ways that can help some of those families that perhaps didn't have the technology, such as a laptop or a computer, so that the children can do it. For me, and this is my personal view, I would think that the children who need to go back are those who've probably got exams next year. Sort of the top end of the school, if you like, the education system. The little ones I think will always pick up, they're like sponges. It will just absorb them whenever they hear it. So for me, I think, for those who were in year 6 in the primary school, transitioning up to the high school, I think it's important that they can see the high school and get the feel of it before they go. I remember going to the high school, God, all those years back now, look how old am I. But I remember feeling apprehensive about going, and there was no coronavirus and nothing around. But you hear such awful things, and people will always try to say, the big school, as we always called it, the big school, and they do this to you and they do that to you. And there was all sorts of folklore that went on. But I can remember being apprehensive about going to the new school. So I think that if there's some way that we can help them, then probably that would be that. But it's certainly not going to happen until we're absolutely sure that we're not putting anybody at risk.
Just to stop the podcast there, we'll get back to it very, very shortly. Just want to remind you guys to subscribe, leave a like on the video and comment your thoughts down below. Also, make sure you follow me on my socials on Twitter, on Facebook and on Instagram. They're all linked in the description down below. There you'll find out who the next guest is on the show. So if you've got a question for them that you want me to ask them, then make sure that you get on my socials, you tweet me, you message me on Instagram, you message me on Facebook, and you let me know who you'd like to see on, and also the questions you have for those guests. Back to the podcast. That's the most important thing, is finding that
Yeah.
balance of, yes, we want the children to get their education, but if it's
Mm,
putting them at risk, and as you said, it's not really them who are likely to feel the effects of COVID. It's who they're going to pass it on to, as yourself as a grandmother.
yeah.
My mum is a grandmother as well. So that risk, you
Yeah.
don't really want to put people like that at risk, as they are mixing with so
Yeah.
many children from so many different backgrounds, different family members around. I just wanted to get into the idea of how this is going to affect the children mentally, because they're missing out on education, of course, to some extent, and the teachers aren't in school with them. But you also want to keep the balance of safety. So how can we ensure that the balance is good, that mentally the kids are okay and that they're getting the education, but that we're not putting them at risk?
Yeah, I think this is mental health is a big issue that we have to tackle, and for children as well. And I think, you know, we do have to make sure that we approach this. It's quite sad when you hear stories and tales of children who are quite worried about, you know, if they went to school, would they be able to go and wash their hands? How would, you know, how many times should they wash their hands? And really genuinely concerned about how they would cope. And I think, you know, that is the big, I mean, I think it's going to be the big issue for a lot of people, is mental health and how it affects people. And I think, you know, that will be the almost that ticking time bomb that we hope that we can avoid. But we know technically that we're not going to, because so many people are now displaying symptoms of anxiousness, anxiety, you know, sort of despair really about being, and it, you know, it's all right for me. I've got a garden, I've got a reasonable sized house. You know, my husband starts to get on my nerves, I can disappear to another room, you know. But if you're in a small flat with lots and lots of, and not just in a small flat, but if you're just in accommodation whereby you feel you're on top of each other, then that is something as well that you have to deal with. So I can see that, you know, people thinking, yes, they want their children to go back to school, but I think we have to make sure that we have got it safely turned out. And I think we have to just reassure those children that we can, and they will come through it, and they will return to whatever we can make the best of in their school years later on. So, you know, not all is lost. So I think we should be saying to them, this is an opportunity to learn differently. You know, you can learn on the computer, you can learn by other ways. And then when we all get back together, we can talk about how we learned and so develop that. But I think it's to try and take that anxiousness out from the children, and try and get it back into some sort of proportion really, about how we will move forward. So it's a very big issue. It's an issue that concerns me, because I know there's a lot of children who have adverse childhood experiences and had them prior to lockdown. So if they were experiencing those and the schools were aware of them, that's why I think we added vulnerable children into the category that could go to hub schools, in an attempt to try and look to make sure that we can see those children and not make it any different for them, because but just to make sure that they weren't going further down, because they were already, some of them were not at the bottom of the pile. That's not an expression that we should use with children, but they were the ones who had got those adverse childhood experiences that perhaps need that little bit more support. So in a way, you know, hopefully the hub schools are picking those things up, and we won't, you know, we'll be able to deal with that once the schools are back up and running.
I think what you say about the children learning in different ways is really exciting in many ways, because they're learning new skills, they're learning different ways of picking up information, and that will serve them better in life in general. And I know it's maybe a small blessing in all of this, but it is a blessing. And the fact that these hub schools can support these children. My mum works in one of the local schools, which gets children in, and she you know, finds so many different kids there. But it's so important that these schools are running and that they're safely doing so, and that the children will, at home, at least they can get a little bit of education, but the children who need to go in can get that support as well. We know that Wales are in lockdown longer than England. One of my concerns, one of many of the listeners' concerns I've heard about, is about English people or other countries coming over to Wales. We saw many videos on social media about this. People on Welsh beaches saying, "Oh, Boris has said I can come here." Well, no, he hasn't.
Yeah.
Do you think, first of all, the
Yeah.
message is clear enough? And do you think there's anything that the government can do to make that message more clear to people in England? Because the message is very clear to us here in Wales. Is it clear enough to people in England that Wales is closed? Don't come.
Obviously not, because people were coming over, and people coming from Scotland even. And Scotland are in the same position as us. They're just about to attempt to relax some of their issues, some of their reasons and lockdown. But people travelling from Scotland, so not only coming from Scotland through England and then into Wales, you just think, where have you been for the last few weeks? The message in Wales, I think, was quite simple. And I know that the Welsh Government did attempt to go and get hold of the Northwest media in particular. So those people in Manchester, Liverpool, and they went on. So, they were on national television saying it hasn't changed here. It hasn't changed. And I've seen the stuff on social media, well, now Boris has told me I can come and sit on the beach. No, he didn't say you could come into Wales. And I think the worrying part of that was that people didn't realise that they'd come actually into Wales, because we have a very porous border. And that's good for lots of things. But then on issues like this, it's very bad in terms of, trying to keep this message. And, I've worked closely with the police on this one. I've been saying to the police whatever, and whilst we introduce fines that we're not as monetary penalising as they were in England to start with, because we were trying to educate. So look, the reason we're asking you not to come in is because of the fact that we're still in this process of going through the new cases of coronavirus. We're not out of it. We're still an issue. We were trying to do that, but last week, before the bank holiday weekend just gone, the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, did increase the fines for police. So, and particularly for that one on social media where I've been here 3 times. Well, that was the 4th time. So should she be fined as a multiplier by 4? You can't do it retrospectively. You've got to start from the time. But at least it's given the police something to work with. Because the other side of that is, if somebody comes for a day out and it's only £30, they're going to add that £30 on the day out. If they get caught, they'll pay the £30. If they don't get caught, then they'll buy extra ice cream on the way home or something. The problem is as well that people travelling in Wales, so people travelling from, say, here in Rhyl to Anglesey, is as much of a problem as somebody coming from Chester into Rhyl. And so you have to have those fines. But, if you've got somebody who hasn't got that money and hasn't got that, what do? So they don't pay it, or they won't pay it, and they decide they're going to go to court. So they go to the court. The courts aren't working. The court systems get clogged up. And so I think that initially, when the First Minister thought about the fines, he did it on the angle of, we'll do it, and only when it's absolutely necessary will the police issue them. But I think we've come to a conclusion that if we are trying to ask our home residents to stay at home, then we can't have one rule for them here in Wales and a rule and that allows people from England to come in and just run roughshod across our countryside. And yes, we love people coming. Tourism is very important to us, and we do have to keep that in mind, but not while we still haven't, got this level of COVID under control.
As you say, tourism is very, very important, and I work in one of the leisure facilities here in Rhyl, and that is so important with tourism. Tourism is what funds it, is what keeps it going financially. Last summer was incredibly busy, and this summer is going to be very, very different. What support is there for local businesses? Because many of them will rely on tourism, and the summer looks like we may get some tourists, but it just won't be the same level as usual. What support is there going to be in place for those businesses?
Well, I think the Welsh Government acted fairly quickly in setting up an economic resilience fund. which allowed monies to be put aside to assist people who were either going to furlough staff, although the furlough scheme was part of the UK government's response to COVID. But there was that, we'll talk about that. Now, the Welsh Government took a decision not to pay the large supermarkets anything. So the likes of Sainsbury's, I suppose I better name them all now. I've named Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Aldi, Morrison's, and any others that may be available in Lidl's, and many others that might be available in the area. They took that decision not to pay them on the grounds that they had got some profits that they could draw on. And what they did then was able to give small and medium enterprise businesses a chance to have some cash, which was something that didn't happen in England. So small and medium enterprise companies in England weren't getting it. We were attempting to help them. And, you know, it's when the pot's dry, the pot's dry. You know, there's only a certain amount, but, you know, we've tried to help those small and medium enterprise businesses to stay. And we've tried to give people an opportunity to say, look, you know, and this economy minister, Ken Skates, made a statement that if you've got a good, healthy business in 2019 and going into 2020, hopefully we'll do our best to make sure that your business is as healthy and as good in 2021, 2022. So, you know, that's a big ask as well, because we don't know how long we're going to be in lockdown. We don't know how long the economy is going to have to be at a slower pace. And that's quite a big thing, because, I mean, and it's been likened to me, and I think similar to the lease lending after the Second World War, where we've only just finished paying. I mean, Second World War is almost 75 years VE Day, and yet we only finished paying the very last payment of lease lending about 5 years ago. I think, I can't remember, don't quote me on that. Perhaps one of the listeners will come back and give me the proper date. But and so in terms like that, I think we'll be paying for this for a long time. But what we have to do is make sure that we can get people, when it's safe to do so, back into work, get the economy kick-started, and hopefully, you know, everybody will have staycations and everybody that can come to Wales when it's safe to do so.
Exactly. There's no point rushing anything back. Again, it's all about those baby steps. It's about saying, okay, we can do this. We'll do this. It's safe. Now we can move on to the next step. It's safe. Because what we don't want to see is the second wave. And what we've seen in England a lot is Boris releases a little bit of the rules, and then all of a sudden you look at a beach in Bournemouth and it's absolutely packed. You know, and it's just crazy. And I'm very fortunate. In my role, in my work, I get paid a full wage. I'm going back to work next week for 2 days of the week. But there are a lot of people who aren't in that position. We're going to finish with a few listener questions. As always, if you want to get in touch, follow me on Twitter. I put up the guest on there so you know who's going to be on, so you can put in your questions. The first question is about local community groups. So many people will socialise through those community groups, whether that's dance classes, sports, choirs, different things. When can it be realistic to get back together, do you think, for these guys?
Well, you know what, we've seen community groups be born out of COVID, haven't we? I can name 2 or 3 who I know where they've done social distance bingo in. I could never imagine social distance bingo because people will chat, and you know, I don't know whether you've ever been to a bingo, but if you go to bingo and you dare say anything when they're playing bingo, I mean, you're almost, you know, thrown out, you know, frog marched out of the establishment. So how you're doing social distance bingoing is fine, but people are doing that, and people have come together as community spirits. But I think the serious point and people are asking is about dance groups and about choirs and stuff. It's where it's the social distancing, and so it's this 2-meter rule. And so if you're trying to say, well, dance is exercise, yes, you can do it out in the open. And I've seen some dance groups starting in the open, and it is about not being enclosed in a building, because apparently all the scientific evidence proves that if you're out, it can't transmit as quickly as it does inside, and it's about staying 2 meters apart. So you've seen some fantastic things where choirs have got together, and you know, you see the tiles on the Zoom where they're all singing, and that's the sort of thing. But I think it's going to be a while before we do that, because I think that would be quite something that we would have to make sure that the government was really convinced that we would not be pushing that R rate up to include for the sake of, one dance session a week in a church hall somewhere. So I think it's going to be a while, and that's my view. I don't have any inside knowledge as to what the Welsh government could come out on Friday and say we're going to do it, but I realistically I don't think they are.
I have to agree with you. I'm part of a sports club, and to think that, trying to do social distancing and that would just simply not work. And I think people need to understand that you can't have it all your way. We have to be honest and realistic about where we are at as a country. And if we want to make sure that that second wave doesn't come in, doesn't affect us, then we have to follow these rules. And maybe it's a bit of suffering and a bit of staying away from some people for a while. But again, as you said, through Zoom, through technology, people have been starting incredible groups, have been keeping in contact. And that is something that we definitely encourage people to do. This is a fantastic way of doing the podcast, is that we can do it through technology. And that's something that people need to understand, that a little bit of pain, and then hopefully maybe this year or maybe be early next year, that people then will finally be able to get together. The next question is about the border. We've spoken a little bit about this, so we won't go into depth on this. But why haven't we seen cross-border signs explaining about Wales being closed? We've seen so many people come across, but we'll just glance over this quickly because we've already spoken a bit about it.
I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? We have tried, as I said before, I know the Welsh Government were trying to tell people in the Northwest, and I know the police forces, both in Cheshire and Manchester Police, have been working with North Wales Police to try and tell their communities to do it. But, do we really... I hope it doesn't have to come to the fact where we have to have, border control, because that's not where we are about this. This is about a public health situation. It's not anything sinister. It's about public health, just saying to people, just stay local within your locality. And then when it's all lifted, we can then all get back together again, because there are families that are suffering. So I suppose it is that. And I mean, the police, they've got other things to do. Criminals haven't stopped because COVID is around. I mean, so the police have got their roles to do. And I just think, I don't particularly want to see a sign up that says Wales is closed. But on the automatic signs, apparently, if you look on Facebook and on social media, I shouldn't say Facebook, I should say other social media outlets, they have been flashing these signs up: Wales are closed, or Wales's regulations, non-essential travel. So if your journey is not essential, turn around, go home. So they are trying to do that, I suppose, in a technological way, that rather than having somebody standing there, police officer standing there and putting his hand up and turning around physically, but they have been doing that as well.
I think also people need to use a bit of common sense, to be honest, and people need to understand, okay, Wales is in lockdown, but also that if Boris is still saying, okay, stay alert, that doesn't mean, okay, off you go on holiday to North Wales or whatever. It's about having common sense. And that's something, we've seen a lot of people do that, yes, but this is just my opinion. We've seen a lot of people do that, but there are a lot of people who quite simply are just ignoring the laws and gathering together. We saw on Victory Day, which should be an incredible celebration, but obviously a bit different this year, but people being ridiculous and meeting in large groups, and people who are maybe at risk as well, meeting in groups. It's not going to help the situation. And for me, especially as a sports fan, I love football and I want to see football, fans in the stadium. I want to see fans, I want to watch football and see fans, but we've got to understand that it's just simply not safe. And, it's only now in Germany we're seeing the league start again. So we are a few weeks behind Germany. So we have to be realistic about this and keep working together. That's how we're going to get through this.
I think it's keep working together is the answer. Yeah,
definitely. And I think we can't get sick and tired of this lockdown. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's annoying, but we have to understand that we're working together, that everyone is in the same boat here in Wales, that everyone is frustrated, although different people have different frustrations regarding it. But we will get through this together. That's what people have to remember, and not jump the gun and think, okay, I can now go do this. it's stay at home and protect the NHS.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, and the final question, we have glanced a little bit on this as well, is about policing. Do we need or could we see more policing out and about? Because when I've been about Rhyl, the town centre sometimes has been fairly busy, and a few people mixing together a little bit, especially in supermarkets as well. Could we see more policing?
That's always the question, whether it's through a COVID lockdown or not. I mean, you see, people say, oh, well, you never see police on the streets. I suppose you can say that when they're never in the street that you want them to be in. But, they've had massive cuts over the last few years. So, don't let's sort of try and mask that one, because there are some difficulty around resources. But, they've done an incredible job, and they've got families. So when they're out and about, working, and then they don't know who they're mixing with, they're having to deal with stuff. And then they have to go home to their families. So, they've got a family as well, in the same way as we're all trying to stay safe. So I think the police are trying. I think the neighbourhood policing teams are trying to get out and about. And I think they are doing, but their main thing is to try and make the A55, turn people around and ask people to go back on the 55 to stop them coming into the beauty spots. And I mean, there is a big issue there, but I just hope that people realise that, all our emergency services, all our key workers are doing a tremendous job. And that includes, people in shops as well, supermarket staff, and, they've kept the supermarkets open, probably at not at a great risk, but at a risk to their families as well. And, as you said, you've been lucky, you've been had your wage paid and you haven't had to worry so much. But for some people who are on those where it makes a big difference, and they've gone to work, and they've probably thought, am I going to go to work or shall I stay at home? And they've balanced that out, but they've seen that what they're doing is good work. So, and once again, to the NHS staff, I mean, well, in whatever sector of the NHS you work, you have played a blinder, and you deserve all our support. And the least we can do after this is all over is to remember the minutes that we went out and clapped every Thursday, and to turn that into an action that makes them really know that people appreciate what they have done through this pandemic. And who knows, we're not through it yet. So, they've still got to keep going. And, but I think they ought to, or I think they do know, and they hope they recognise that there are people that were supporting them there and keeping them, and really do value what they're doing.
Exactly. And I think going back to the policing issue, I think, again, the police can only do so much. It's down to us. We have a responsibility. We know what we need to do. It's common sense. Stay at home. And then on to the NHS. I think people don't realise how lucky we are here in the UK and in Wales. It's free. There are so many countries around the world who completely envy that and would love to have that. And we are so fortunate here that we can go to the chemist, get our prescription for free. We don't have to pay for it. We don't have to pay to go see the doctor. We don't have to pay for this operation. We know that it's covered for us. And in a sense, I think it's a little bit sad that it's taken something such as this pandemic for people to realise how fortunate we are. And as you said, my hope is that people will continue to appreciate what they do and support them after this has all happened. And when they maybe have to wait in A&E for that little bit longer, that they'll be a lot slower to criticise and a lot slower to say, oh, the NHS is rubbish, why can't we have it like this country or whatever.
Yeah. Or if you haven't had to go to the NHS because you sprained your ankle in this last 8 weeks, perhaps when it's all returning, do you need to go to A&E if you sprain your ankle in the next 8 weeks if we're coming out of lockdown? And probably the answer is no, because we've set in, virtual appointments with GPs now as well. The Welsh Government have done that. So, let's just think about whether that trip is necessary. And, and I think, we could alter the way in which the NHS, we actually deliver the services. And we have to remember as well that, the NHS has been dealing with the non-COVID as well. So having had to deal with COVID and keep an area there, they've had to keep an area what they call clean, to deal with people who have got other issues. So, you know, fair play, you know, it takes a lot to work that out as well. So, and hopefully, as you say, you know, we will all remember that, you know, the good work that they've done.
Definitely. And finally, just one last thing. If you could speak to your area now, to your people in the area of Vale, what message would you give to them?
Right, it's got to be stay home, stay safe, and protect the NHS. And until that changes, I think that's the most simplest thing that we can all do. And I think it is go and put, if you're able to, go and put the kettle on and have a cup of tea. And if you can afford a biscuit, because that's the actual, I think that's the medicine that we all need, is a good cup of tea. And if you're able to use social media or Zoom or whatever to talk to loved ones, then do it. So it is stay home, stay safe, and protect the NHS and save lives.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.